This is the August the 6th, 2019 Animal Control Board meeting for the City of New Smyrna Beach. We're in City Commission chambers. At this time, I ask if anybody has cell phones, electronic devices, please silence them at this time. And call the roll, please.
Alrighty. I'm gonna have to go from memory. I don't have a list in front of my face. Does anyone have a, oh wait, is it in our, there it is. I have a list. Sorry. All right, James R. Belt.
Here.
All right, Lori Crane.
Here.
Alfred Forkhammer will not be joining us. If he is, he will be late. Robert Leonard.
Here.
Kathy Blackman.
Here.
Thank you. The roll has been called.
And for the record, Mr. Forkhammer's, should he be absent from the meeting, it's excused. Board members, you had opportunity to look over the minutes of the last meeting. If you haven't, take a moment to do so. And we'd entertain a motion to accept the minutes. Do you have changes?
I make a motion to accept.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay, I assume everyone has had an opportunity to look through the information that Megan Wilkes has put together for us. Once again, Megan, very thorough job. Gave us a lot of information there. That's all very good. I also want to thank you all for accommodating my scheduling conflict and being here today rather than Tuesday. I appreciate that.
For me.
Critical issues of largemouth bass I was dealing with.
I know, we knew that's what was going on. We knew that.
This is the animal board, so.
I was in Lake County, so. Megan, would you, one question before we get started. I think anytime we have something like this come up, your boots on the ground for us. And how often is tethering an issue, or how many times do you answer complaints or address issues regarding animals being unsafely or inhumanely tethered?
It's not an everyday occurrence. I would say on average maybe once a month or so. It's not like it's a super high occurrence type of event.
How is it handled now, and what's your compliance when you?
Right now, as long as they have the basics, food, water, and shelter, that's all that's required.
But of these, on average, once a month cases that you investigate, are the people compliant with your recommendations?
For the most part.
And have there been any deaths of animals for being improperly tethered?
At least none that can be directly linked to tethering.
If you find an unsafe situation, of course, you immediately advise, and if it's serious enough, you take action, correct?
I can, yes, depending, of course, on situation.
Yeah.
Have you had to confiscate any animals for
No.
being improperly or unsafely tethered?
No.
Have you condensed these down to what you think would best suit this city's needs?
The ones that came from FACA, the Florida Animal Control Association, those survey results were everybody that responded to their survey throughout the state of Florida. So that was just in there for everybody's information to see what other cities and counties were doing. And then I also, of course, included in Ormond Beach and the one they just recently passed as well. So I didn't directly link any specifically for this city. I just gave everybody all the information I could find. Because while tethering is not ideal, we do have low-income areas that cannot afford a fence or something like that for their dogs.
Does the Florida Animal Control Association have a stance on the issue, and have they made that public?
They had not anything that they've made public, no.
Okay.
So you have no specific recommendations about what length of tethering rope or chain to adopt, what temperature range would be proper for us?
I mean, I
Some
think-
of them are, very, very generalized, especially with the temperature range.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of them in here that even just, go below freezing, which Florida doesn't. We are more concerned about heat here in Florida than freezing, I would think.
Yeah, and they actually refer to heat index, I think,
Yeah.
100 degrees, which
Some of
to
them
me
do,
is
yes.
still way too hot for an animal to be out. But
Yeah.
Now, on page 36 of the packet of the ordinance revisions that we had, I think it's section 18-313 of tethering of dogs. This was your recommendation when we updated the ordinances,
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
And
that would be.
And it does address the length and...
Yes, that one does.
I think you did an excellent job of, of addressing the diverse conditions and populations that we do have around here. Because, we go from the beach side to the country, and I think there's always a handful of
Yeah.
circumstances that require a dog to be tethered.
And-
Nobody really, goes out of their way to want to do it.
Yeah.
But it's just my opinion, but I think you did a very good job of reasonably
Thank you.
addressing this.
And also, I have not had a complaint come in since all of this has been passed in regards to tethering. It's definitely not a common issue.
And if a dog was being neglected or some sort of abuse from anything else, we have ordinances that cover that, right?
Yeah,
It's
we
not
have the
necessarily the
ordinances and
tethering
statutes
itself.
and everything,
Okay,
yeah.
all right.
another thing, where there were some differences between the agencies that you contacted in, I think even Orman's ordinance, was it the hours of the day? Some people, some would say, we're not going to tether them at night, and some of them say, we're not going to tether them during the day.
Yeah.
Um,
And that could be part of the diversity of where they're at. If they're in
Well,
an area where there's a lot of bears or,
Yeah.
Wildlife that come out during the night, they're going to,
to
of
her
course,
point, that's-
recommend,
Yeah, that's exactly what I was referring to.
not to tether overnight.
And there were some instances where an animal can only be tethered if the owners or responsible people are maintaining visual contact with the animal.
Yeah, there's some that have those requirements as well.
Well, that certainly seems like a good idea. I will not share stories about what can happen with an unsupervised tethered animal, but trust me, the worst.
I'm sure
can
I've seen
happen.
some of those.
The worst, I mean, the very worst, and not only that, they happen to people that love their animals and were heartbroken about what happened.
Yeah.
So, all of these ideas are good. I think some are maybe a bit far-reaching, but
Yes.
I guess what we have to take up are some of the particulars, and that is, one of them comes to mind. If you have a 40-pound dog, we're going to allow him to drag around 5 pounds of chain, an eighth of their body weight. I don't know who came up with that, but it seemed to be sprinkled through a lot of these.
On almost all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some of them where there's no ratio to the length of chain and weight of chain. Some of them, they got to be a minimum of 12, some of them, and that's all they say. You could have
Yeah.
20 feet of chain. So I think put an eighth of your body weight around your neck and drag it around for a while. I think you may have a better feeling for how much weight that really is, and I question whether or not that's acceptable. What do you think?
I mean, we can always start smaller, and then if we have to, we can always add verbiage in to where if the dog is constantly breaking it, then we'll make an exception to have something more sturdy or something to hold the dog.
I mean, I certainly don't want to reinvent the wheel. The Florida Animal Control Association has come up with that, and they've done their research, and they've come up with, you know, a lot of these particulars, length of chain and so forth. We certainly don't want to change that, but if this is arbitrary as it appears, I certainly think we should consider.
The eighth definitely seems to be the most common one out of all of them. They go back to the eighth of the body weight.
Yeah, that's what I saw in almost all.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Almost all of them refer to the eighth of the weight.
But when you go out and you have complaints about a dog that's on a tether that may not be healthy and treated adequately, do you find that in most cases you do see a problem? Or in most cases do you not?
In most cases, it's lack of education. Like the dogs knock the water bowl over. Well, if you take a 5-gallon bucket and you dig a hole out and you put the 5-gallon bucket in the hole and then fill it with water, the dog can no longer knock it over. So a lot of times it's, well, I fill it up, but the dog knocks it over again. It goes, well, you can do this to, you know, keep water in front of them. So a lot of times education works too, more than anything.
Is usually your calls about a neighbor or someone that's noticed a dog that feels that the dog is not being treated adequately?
Yes, they're mostly from neighbors or somebody passing by or...
But in most cases you don't find that to be the case?
Not in most cases. I mean, in most cases dogs could be treated better, but they're not under cruelty standards or anything like that.
Very good. Do you believe our goal is to try to restrict tethering as a group, or are we trying to ban tethering in our city?
I do not think we should be banning it. Not everybody has the means to afford a fence or a way to let their dog outside safely. Even if the dog, you know, comes in and goes out for a couple hours, whatever, they still need a way to safely contain their dog to their yard without their dog running.
So then your recommendation would be to restrict the tethering specifics, correct?
My only recommendation is we don't get rid of it completely, whatever the board decides going forward.
All right, very good.
I just don't want to see it done away with completely.
What about the hours? Anybody have any thoughts about that? You know, say our dog park, for instance, at the boardwalk. Dogs are only allowed to be there from the time they open in the morning until 10 o'clock in the morning, and then they can't go out there because of heat and health considerations. And we've got a lot of variations in landscape. Some yards are shaded, some are not. Some don't have a tree in the yard. There's a lot of just a lot of potential for problems unless I think we address the hours of the day where the animals can be tethered. I don't have a range in mind, but I just think the rules at the boardwalk tell us that's there are times when animals should not be exposed to the heat and sunlight or direct sunlight. So I think if we come up with something, that should be in there. The length of the tether.
And the weight.
That's
the weight
in
is the most
Should,
important.
yeah, the length.
number 5.
I think there's if you give them 50 feet of chain and they're in compliance with all the other requirements, I still maintain there's a much higher chance for entanglement in the chain itself.
Right.
You know, so I think there needs to be minimums, which is related to the length of the dog, and that's specified in here, but there should be a maximum. I think there's, again, should be specific hours of the day where an animal could be tethered. And I would like to see us pare down the temperature range that animals can be exposed to. I don't know how people determine heat index at home. They don't have thermometers or the ability to measure or to know that.
They see it on the news, that's why they know what it is.
Yeah, but they don't know what it is in their yard.
No, they don't.
And I'm not sure we're gonna go around with thermometers and
Yeah.
sit in people's yards and see what the temperature is. But again, I think that's just another arm of the
Well,
enforcement.
if we do the hours, that should also help with the temperature.
Yeah, that'll help a lot. So those are the main things I see that we need to pare down and get some detail on.
Did you see an example in any of the counties that you gave us information on that you would recommend us looking closely at that particular entity? Because they do vary. They vary from
No tethering?
no tethering to who cares.
Pompano Beach doesn't allow it at all.
I know.
Yeah, there are a few that have done away with it completely. The Port St. Lucie has a pretty good one.
What page is that one?
That's the first one, I think.
Packet, page 6. Yeah, I think that's the
Packet
first
page
one.
16. City of Port St. Lucie.
And the one right next to it, Pasco County, is what you were talking about, Dr. Leonard, where the dog has to be within visual range of the owner. If we wanted to see what other cities close to us were doing, in the back of the packet, Ormond Beach is on page 82. Starts on page 82 for what they just passed.
Regardless of the temperature, the dog is required to have shelter, whether it's a doghouse or a,
Yeah, it needs to be up off the ground. It can't be just a tarp on some
Yeah.
stakes over the dog.
so a shelter is required anyway, so the dog is able to get out of the sun,
Yeah.
no matter what time of day it is.
But that's required whether it's a fenced-in yard or tethered.
Yeah,
or
it has
anything
any
else.
outside dog, yeah.
One thing on the Port St. Lucie one is I didn't know if that was a hybrid of their leash law as well as their tethering law. But all the others prohibit the use of spike collars and choke collars when the animals are tethered. This implies, unless this is the last sentence there, part of their leash law, it implies that you can use those types of collars as long as the owner is
Under the direct control.
yeah.
Under direct control.
Yeah.
That means on the leash.
On leash or the dog while you walk to and from the tether or something like that.
That would not apply to a tethering situation.
No.
How practical is it to require, and I'm asking for board members, to require these broad chest, well-fitting harnesses versus anything around the neck for animals that are tethered?
I think they're a little easier to slip out of,
The harnesses?
the harnesses, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking just the opposite.
They-
You know,
yeah.
collars. You can only get a collar so tight. And I have dogs come in our office that first thing we do is put a slip knot lead around their neck because people come in with their leashes and collars. The dog puts the brakes on, starts backing up, they back right out of them.
Yeah.
So that's why I said that, because I see it happen all the time.
They can get out of their harnesses too. I see it happen a lot.
Really?
Yeah. And if they were out there bored, they'd figure it out.
So when I learned something else today, I guess it would be do you leave cats involved in this whole thing or not?
If it were to pass, it would apply to the cats too.
Have you ever been?
It said the only
I just
one
don't
we
want the
have just
commission
goes
lying
out.
to us.
I know. Have you ever responded to a call where a cat was on a tether?
Yes, there's one that's out in one of the newer duplex housing developments type areas that's being built, and he goes out for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening on a tether in her backyard.
My cat, put a tether on my cat, they'll lay down there, not gonna move until they get the tether off.
And he's fine with it. He's happy. He goes out there, rolls around,
Good,
and
that's good. Some people walk their cats. There's a few breeds
Yeah.
that don't mind being walked at all. But that's not very common, so.
Megan, do we have a timetable on when Volusia County is gonna have their tethering ordinance done?
no, we don't. I just know it's being worked on. They're doing similar to what we did and revamping their whole chapter.
We actually have a meeting in 3 weeks that we're hopefully gonna come to a conclusion at that time in 3 weeks. But there is a lot of issues at the county at the present time, so
Yeah.
there's other issues to deal with right now, so.
Yes.
The reason I brought that up, I was wondering, of course, I still want us to, work on this individually now that we've brought these points up. Work on them individually, but I would like to see the county's version before we do something concrete or send something to the commission. Make sure, because every one of these I read, I get a little parcel of information that's helpful. I wonder if it would be helpful for us to wait and see what the county does and have that information before us, so we don't leave anything out or we don't do anything that's contrary to what the county is approving.
It's a good point. I would agree with that.
We were really wanting a decision to be made at this meeting, but if everybody feels the need to wait, then I would recommend having a special meeting and not going to the next regular meeting.
Okay.
That's okay.
Well, we can certainly go ahead and address some of these particulars. Go down the list like things that I detailed. Certainly anybody else feel free to chime right in, but what about hours? That's what we're looking for now is particulars. Do we have staff recommendations about hours?
Hours, if we were going to talk about hours, obviously during the heat of the day would be not allowed. We'd be looking for something probably in the morning and in the evenings.
What do you think of Seminole County with their 9 p.m. to, or 5 p.m. till 9 a.m.?
The overnight. It would
They do or don't allow
They
it?
do. I'm thinking that would create a
do.
barking dog.
barking dog or coyotes or other wildlife get involved depending what area you're in.
I know, because I don't know. And then you're not watching, you're sleeping, so.
Yeah, anything can happen at that time.
We could do something from 9 a.m. till noon and then from, say, 5 p.m. until dusk.
Well, that's
Something
your
like
half of what I was going to say was related, like the beach used to be.
that. Yeah,
A half hour,
Yeah.
one way or another related to sunrise.
right.
To 2 hours after sunrise because of daylight savings time and the changes that come with normal seasons. Have it until 2 hours after sunset. What about something like that?
I like that idea.
Okay.
And
Would
I
there
think
be
our-
any exemptions to these for like farm dogs that, or hunting hounds or anything like that?
Your hounds aren't normally tethered, they're kept in kennels.
Normally.
Normally, yes.
Although I
I-
think a 10-foot tether on a 12-foot run, I think is way nicer than being in a kennel.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
These guys have got 20 dogs in cages that are just, they don't have enough room to tether 20 dogs.
Oh, I've been
in.
around
Oh, yeah.
hunting hounds for 50 years.
So.
Yeah, the ones that I'm aware of are all in kennels right now. I don't have any that I'm aware of that are on tethers.
So, are we in agreement then from dogs can be tethered from sunrise to 3 hours after sunrise, 4 hours after sunrise? Until,
The sunrise is what, 7:30?
6:30.
6:30.
so,
Say
so
4
by
hours.
10,
Say 4
4
hours?
hours.
so,
and then 3 hours before sunset. And as far as the issue with the county, what I think we all agree that we don't want to, try to create something that is completely opposite of what the county does. We just want to be,
Right.
kind of be on the same page.
Well, I mean, like I said, if everybody really wants to hold off on it, I don't think this can be a huge issue. Even though we wanted to get it done today, I would just recommend a special meeting be held so we're not waiting another 4 months.
Well, the county should have already had theirs done. They were behind schedule in getting that done. It was supposed to be done last meeting that we had, so.
Well, I know of the other issues going on,
There's so
so I
much
know why it didn't
Yeah,
get done.
yeah. But the intent is to get it done in the next 3 weeks.
Let's see.
And as far as the weight of the chain compared to the weight of the dog, I think we can all agree that the standards that we saw in most of them are acceptable, or would you like to think that it should be stricter, or
I
1/8, you want to take 1/8
these,
to
because it
1/16?
seems to be so consistent, and I think somebody must have done a little bit of homework
Me
or
too.
done some research, so I guess, and that's something that could be changed in the future. Back to the hours thing while it's fresh on my mind, we'll try to make this simple. Say from sunrise until 3 hours after sunrise, and from 3 hours before sunset until sunset.
I think that would be
Keep
acceptable.
keep it simple,
Yeah.
3 and 3.
3 and 3.
Okay, so then the length of the chain is just a, do you like the minimum idea? Do you like a range? Do you like it based on the length of the dog? Because there were some variations there.
I think the one you currently have says at least 10 feet in length or 4 times the length of the animal from nose to base of the tail.
Mhm. One was 12.
No, I'm talking about the one that Megan
That was
had.
the one that just recently passed.
Oh, okay.
That was the one that Megan had here.
I think it should be at least 10 foot.
That's what she
Or
has.
4 times, whichever is longer.
Whichever is greater, yeah.
You think so too? All right, good.
Yeah.
Okay, we're
then
making
that was-
progress, we're moving forward.
That's what she has.
Yep, that's what's in there currently.
Okay,
And we would have this same thing that was, most of them had about the choke collars and the spike collars being prohibited.
Correct, that's already in there.
That's already in there.
Yes.
Okay. Well, the big thing I see is some discuss is whether the animals are being under direct supervision or visual contact. People that go to, we're talking about taking some socioeconomic considerations here, making a decision. People leave and go to work. Even these hours may be an imposition on somebody. But this is about making sure the safety of the animals as much as anything. So, what about
Well, you think
supervision?
there was, I think, a smaller percentage of that detail in the ordinances, or in their examples. There was a small percent, maybe 10% of them had that in there. And I think that, in my opinion, that's a good idea. I think if somebody wants to go out in their backyard and sit under their awning and they have their dog tethered while they're out there, it's not an issue.
Right.
But to make it mandatory, like you said, it's going to influence somebody, because
Yeah, but even during the hours that we're specifying here, anyone who leaves to go shopping, leaves the dog totally unattended, if they're in compliance with all the other things, like you can't have anything within the length of the chain that it can get wrapped around, then I guess we're not having a lot of problems right now, so I guess it would be okay for us to approve the animals being unattended. No visual contact necessary.
I
Would
agree.
you agree?
I agree.
I think doing it otherwise would create a real stumbling block in the passage.
I just want to make this reasonable
I know. Yeah.
for Megan's office to enforce these things.
Yeah.
Okay. What other particulars would you like to see us address?
The only other one I can think of that I've seen other counties address is inclement weather.
Yeah. Can let's take the blizzard out.
I don't think we
A
have to worry
dog out
about
in
that.
somebody's backyard has a doghouse or has shelter, that's mandatory.
Yes, that's mandatory.
And it has to also include any dog on a tether, the same.
Yeah, any dog kept outside for any length of time has to have the shelter.
And as far as inclement weather for dogs that are outside,
Yeah, I wasn't talking about the afternoon rainstorm that Florida gets.
No.
and, like the.
but the hurricanes are a different situation.
Yes.
There are people that leave their dogs out tethered in hurricanes.
That's what I was getting at, yeah.
Yeah, so,
I think those may be the people that we're trying to touch here.
yeah.
So the Florida Animal Control Association recommendation then on the, is what you are promoting? The dog has access to water, shelter, shade, and dry ground.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one I like, 'cause that dry ground is,
Yeah. But then I also want to look at your disasters, your hurricanes, and
In the mud.
because that works for an afternoon thunderstorm or something like that. But
I don't think, there was one that was, they included fire in there, like, places on fire, you're gonna tether the dog in the yard.
I mean, depending how fast the fire happens and fire spreads, you
far
might
you
not
can
be able to
get away
get
from
there
the house.
fast enough.
So the one, again, that one on page 37, that kind of takes everything in, doesn't it?
I like that too.
Can we just adopt that then? That
The
was,
Flagler Beach.
it says City of Bunnell on mine. Page 37, that's in the.
Right above Flagler Beach.
Oh yes, I see it.
So we have 5 times the length of the body. It's not detailed on weight though. But we can add those details we just discussed as far as the weight of the restraint.
Well, I was actually, we're just referring to the inclement weather part of it.
Okay. Yeah, that's very specific.
Is it subsection 4?
Right. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then 9 with our modifications. Is that clear?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other particulars you want us to address directly?
I think we've hit all the ones I can think of.
Mr. Ryan, do you see anything that we're missing that was going to get tripped up in legal?
Not that I can consider, no, sir.
And then our plans would be to call a meeting after the county puts their ordinances in effect, or they actually draw up a policy. Then we'll have a meeting after that to compare the 2 policies.
If that's what everyone wants.
Does everyone agree to that? We're talking about at least a month from now, so.
So I guess I'm a little confused on which of these sections you disagree with or you want to have changed. These are the, this is the ordinance that Megan came up with.
See, I'm just on a different page here.
Well, yeah, these are the surveys. This was given to us at a previous meeting when we.
Oh, okay,
when
that's
we
why I
were-
don't have it.
When we were approving or going over the ordinances that Megan had updated.
Yeah, I remember.
Because reading through that, I thought it was reasonable, wasn't far-reaching or excessive in any way. When I looked through the surveys from the other counties, it seemed pretty balanced on the ones that had no tethering ordinances at all, the ones that I considered reasonable, and then the ones that I considered to be a little excessive. And it seemed pretty even throughout. And while I think looking at other cities and county ordinances to get suggestions is always a good idea, I don't think we should be modeling our ordinances after any certain city just because we are so different and diverse from those cities.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to model it after anybody else, but I say there's pieces of this one and pieces of that one.
Right, there are,
Like,
there's
for instance, now, in the one that you're talking about that we don't have in front of us, I left my big file at home. I don't think any female dog in heat should be tethered.
No, for
That's
the
it.
spay neuter ordinance. So
Yeah.
that, if I find that, then that's when that comes into effect.
I mean, that's listed on here, that number 9.
Well, because if I find them while they're in heat or something, we can't fix them right then and there. So then that would make them have to go inside.
So no female dog in heat should be tethered, period. Thank you.
You're welcome. I never throw anything away.
But,
So,
so what is contrary to what we just agreed on in here? Everything's the same, isn't it?
See anything different?
Well, I don't think there's, like, the time restrictions.
I
That's
know.
not in here, and I'm just a big believer in common sense, and if a dog is suffering from the heat, that's not necessarily, that shouldn't be a tethering thing. That's somebody is letting their dog suffer from the heat outside. I mean, whether it's a fenced-in yard. I know people that have beautifully fenced-in yards, not a speck of shade, not, providing all of that stuff, regardless of whether it's a tethered situation or a fenced-in yard situation. I don't want to micromanage. I don't want to be over-restrictive. I don't want to start having an ordinance for every situation. I think the ordinances that you've created, I think, can be used for the tethering situations. If you see an unsafe situation or something like that, I think some of the existing ordinances you have can be applied to it, and I just don't want to over-regulate.
And I would agree if I thought everybody was going to use as much common sense as you and I think they should.
Well, that's when we count on the neighbors to call and her to hit you.
The other thing too is that's the enforcement arm has a better ability to enforce, let's say, when you have specific hours when you know the dog is not supposed to be outside in the heat. That was my thinking anyway. She can be driving by, know what time it is, and know that there's a dog tethered in the backyard, and they shouldn't be that time of day.
But then at the same time, if it's January and it's really cold, that's the warmest part of the day, and that's when the dog wants to be out.
That's true.
So, you might be solving one problem but creating another.
Well, the temperature range thing is, has to be addressed in Florida. I think.
Well, like I said, I think that falls under whether it's a dog in a fenced-in yard or whether it's a dog that's tethered. If it's still out in the heat, it's still out in the heat.
Requirements for shelter is the same in either case.
Right.
How do you feel about the time frame? Do you feel like there should be a time frame included?
That's one of those yes and no. During the summertime, it's great. During the wintertime, as she pointed out, it's where then they would be out during the colder time, the coldest parts of the day.
And then common sense on the part of the enforcers comes into play.
Well, this is true. I just think,
I know what you're saying.
I just think we
agree with
need,
that.
agree too,
I just
Sonia.
think we need, I think we have done a good job of providing her with the tools that she needs. I think she has done an excellent job of letting us know the tools that she needs to protect the pets and the people of New Smyrna. And I just think unless there's a reason to change, what we have here is acceptable and reasonable, and I think it serves like I said, the pets and the people of this town very well.
And another food for thought for the heat. If they're out in it every day, they're probably used to it. Horses are out in it every day. Cows are out in it every day. And, if you have water and shelter during the heat of the day, you will be fine. It's not ideal, and it's not the best situation, but it's also not the end of the world if you have everything else.
And most dogs, whether they're in a fenced-in yard or whether they're on a tether, if they've got a dog house, they're either going to be in it or more than likely under it. They like to dig.
Well, you talk about being, far-reaching, and this ordinance calls for a minimum of 2 hours of exercise every 24 hours, which should be inside the home and interacting with the family. That's about it.
Well, that is pretty extreme.
Yeah. So, these are all, I can say all of these things are things to work from. I don't know
Right.
that I would just take that and say, run with it.
Right.
That's got everything we need and is perfect.
But it's pretty reasonable.
It is, except for 2 hours of exercise.
Well, that's true. Although,
So do you have enough information from us about what we approve to go forward with it, or are there any blanks we need to fill in?
We'll approve, or that's going to be up to you guys as far as your motion and what you decide to put in the motion. If you really want to press it, if you decide to really wait until we see what county does and you decide you want to lay it on the table or something, that's going to be whatever you guys put together.
and actually it says could be,
Yeah, which,
or within a fenced-in area. Doesn't say must be. Exercise could be inside the home
but
or out, in a fenced-in area or an enclosure.
well, this is kind of what I'd hope, kind of a workshop atmosphere I hope that we would have for this. I don't mind having another meeting in a month to tie up loose ends. I don't feel prepared to sift through all of this, because she's reading on one sheet of paper and we're all reading on the information that we were provided with for today's meeting.
Well, I have that too, but.
I know, but I'm saying for us to look at that and try to make a motion from what you have on that sheet and what we have in front of us is a little bit scattered, at least for my brain. So, a lot of things have come to my attention that I would like to think over and come up with a better idea, truthfully. What I thought was a good idea coming in the door today now doesn't seem so good, because I've learned things. So, I would be a little more aggressive and a little more thorough in coming up with particulars and address all these major issues, and come back and be ready to rubber stamp something at the next meeting and put it before the board for a vote.
What if we summarize the conversation we had today and the agreements that we had on the particulars that we talked about? Why don't we summarize that, put that on the table, take it off the table at the next meeting in a month, and then decide whether we approve that or not?
If that's what everybody wants to do, we can make it happen.
What do y'all think?
So could we have a motion then?
There's also, before we make a motion, there's also some people here that want to speak on this while we're still before we vote. So we can open to public comments.
Yeah, we will. But we can still have a motion and a vote as to continue the discussion at an emergency meeting
We
or an
should-
unscheduled meeting?
We should probably do that after the public comment, but yes.
Okay, all right, we'll do that.
So I guess we'll welcome public comment now. There's a sign-in sheet, if you don't mind signing in. Perfect. All right.
Good afternoon, and thank you for what you do. This is the first meeting I've been to.
And your name?
I appreciate all your efforts.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Leslie Sachs, and my address is 816 East 8th Avenue in New Smyrna Beach. I'm against tethering, especially 24-hour tethering, due to the inherent cruelty to the animal. But if we are going to allow it, we need to add additional restrictions. We have a good start with what you've done so far with our ordinance 18313. But I feel we should emulate Ormond Beach's ordinance, which I happen to have a copy of, and I made copies for y'all, then I found out you had copies.
Could you take your hand away from the microphone? There we go, thank you.
Sorry. I would like to see additional tethering restrictions address a dog's age. I don't think puppies should be tethered. And you meant, and I was going to say females in heat, but you did mention that. I think puppies are too playful. I think they could choke. When I was a child, I saw dachshund choke like that. It was horrible. We need to, and you've addressed this, we need to specify hours and temperatures, like we shouldn't go over 85 degrees. Or under 50 degrees, which is spelled out in Ormond Beach's ordinance. And their city is just as diverse as ours. They have a beachside, they have a rural area, they have horses and farms, and then they have in between with apartments. And it's very similar to our city. So I think that's a reason to emulate it. My husband received a letter from Susan Persis, Commissioner Zone 3 of Ormond Beach, and they're utilizing their ordinance to give to the county, and she has sent a letter to all 16 cities stating that they want to, she's writing to share her ordinance and ask for your support in protecting animals throughout Volusia County from abuse and neglect related to the improper and unsafe tethering of animals. So you've addressed that as well, seeing what the county is going to do, and I think the county, she's very involved with that aspect of it. And I think we should also address that the height of the tether should not be a higher elevation as the animal's shoulder height so that they can't hang. And that's also addressed in the Ormond Beach ordinance. And that tethering on public property or government property should be prohibited at all times, because I've seen at art shows or whatever where a dog is just tied to a fence and left alone and no water, just sitting there in the sun. And I guess that's, and the dawn to dusk. I agree we should specify hours like how Smyrna Dunes Dog Beach does, but again, seasonal considerations to take in effect with common sense, where in the middle of the day is great in January, but overnight tethering I think should be prohibited because of wildlife and because of noise disturbances to neighbors. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And these ordinances, the ones that we have been looking at, do have age restrictions. Most of them were under 6 months of age, could not be tethered, just for your information.
Thank you.
And I also believe the tethering that we're considering is on is limited to private property. There was no mention of animals being tethered on public property that I know of.
I didn't see it in our.
Yeah, I don't think there is.
And as you suggested, yes, the 6 months of age was number 6 that we recommended from Bunnell that I have in my notes.
Right.
Correct. See, that's the sheet I was going by.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Okay, Ms. Sachs, thank you very much. Any other public participation? Did we have any other new business that we wanted to discuss?
Not at this time.
Okay.
We have another section for other public comments that'll come up.
Staff report, I think we have a staff report, don't we? This is it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay,
We can bring it back to the board now for a motion if you want to.
okay. Do we have a motion that we continue this discussion in specially arranged meeting before our next quarterly meeting to iron out all the details of this proposed ordinance? So moved. will
Also call
suffice.
motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
We have
All those in favor?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Okay, very good.
Do we specify a time now or a date?
I think the county's still kind of up in the air, isn't it? We'll have a duly noticed public meeting, I'm
Okay.
sure.
The county's meeting is scheduled for September 11th.
Could I get with you after that meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then based on what happens, we'll
Yes.
either set a date for then or later or figure it out.
Absolutely.
Can I at this time ask that our meeting times be at 2:45 instead of 2:30? They've extended the school day this year, and so I'm still in school at 2:30.
3?
If we can make it 2:45, as long as I'm out of there before buses, I can be here by 2:45.
What about staff? Your
You
use
okay?
of the room and
I can check, yeah, as long as, I think this was wide open though, so we are flexible.
2:45?
Thank you.
No problem.
Any other board member comments? Questions? Any other public comment on issues other than the tethering? Yes.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Commissioner Jake Sachs. I'm just here today to follow this one particular item, but primarily I'd like to thank you for your service, your volunteering towards the welfare of animals and the people of New Smyrna Beach. We greatly appreciate your deliberations. They're very thorough, and you have a very tough job. Thank you, guys.
Thank
you, sir.
Not as tough as yours.
Very. Very. There's a lot more people here when you're here, too.
We have a very well-behaved group here usually.
It's hard to do much when it's so cold in here.
Oh,
Hi, my name is Carolyn Martin, and I do have some concerns and questions about trapping in the city of New Smyrna Beach. It's been pointed out to me that trapping is being able to be done by individuals on their property as they see fit. And I find that trapping needs to be kind of regulated. I mean, we're looking at any individual who has no animal knowledge whatsoever handling a trap. And there's no, I mean, they're not doing it under supervision of anybody. And I know as a TNR person, we have some guidelines and restrictions, but when we just have traps and have any Joe Blow handling an animal in a trap, I mean, there's no restriction for that. I mean, out in the county, I could see, if they had raccoons or wild animals but as I understand the law, or maybe the lack thereof any law in the city, as far as trapping, any individual can put a trap on their property and call it a day. There's no time, they don't have to be actively trapping, they don't have to be watching the animal, turn it over to the proper authorities. I'd like to have some more clarification on what those laws are. if possible.
What kind of animals, do you have any specifics about what kind of animals we're talking about?
Well, I have a neighbor who has 4 traps, and he's put them out specifically to keep my cats from enjoying their yard. And he puts the traps out, and well, they stay there 24 hours 7, 24 hours around the clock. So I've not seen any raccoons or anything like that being trapped in them, but it's just he goes off to work and leaves the traps, and I would wonder in this heat if an animal, even one of my feral cats from my colony, came up beside this particular place and got in that trap, and I was unable to get that cat out of that trap, what would happen in this heat? That's a real concern for me, because my degree's in animal husbandry.
These traps are on his property?
They are on his property. We live in a condo association, and they're on his property. We have very limited space there, but we do have very nice greenway with some shade. I've lived there for 4 years, never had any problem. My cats go out about 10, and they come in about 4 a.m. in the afternoon. Never had any problem. Had this person move in or rent right beside me, and he never came over to me and said, can you help me? I have a problem with your cat, and this is my issue, because I would have resolved it. But he called his landlord, blew up their phone, and they told him, well, and then my landlord, who was on the president of our condo association, is no longer going to be there because he's moving to the other coast. He went and took some little things that were supposed to make sound so they wouldn't go on his property. And I told him in the beginning when they first moved in there, I just introduced myself. I said, if you ever have any problem, just please let me know. And he never came over. He just addressed it with his landlord. So he put up these things for sound. And then after that didn't work, my one cat kept going back by his porch. And the sound things didn't work. And he never came over and tried to talk to me. He only came over twice and blew up. And then he had the police come out and he tried to get me for trespassing. So he never had a civil conversation with me, but he's put the traps up, and I've had to have my cats locked inside, and they're absolutely miserable. So, I'm just concerned because if an animal or one of my feral cats, see, my colony is just about a block, maybe a block and a half from there. And because my cats aren't kind of holding down their territory, I'm kind of distressed that some of my colony could come up, especially the back part of his house, and possibly get in one of those traps. And I don't think it's fair for him to leave them baited and set out, covered, and available without any attendance to them.
Have you seen him trap any animals in these traps, rather?
I'm not awake at night, but not so far, because my cats are inside.
So you're not missing any of your cats?
I'm not missing any of my cats. I have seen 2 different cats come into the yard that do not belong to my colony, because every once in a while we'll have a couple stray cats that'll just kind of roam by. But it is it's a situation that I think if we just allow people to randomly put traps out and not resolve problems, that it could be really dangerous. And because if he traps a cat in this heat at 10 a.m. in the morning, and he doesn't come home till 5, and it has no access to water, that's a real concern for me.
Certainly nobody would want to see that. I think and I'm going to ask Ms. Wilkes in just a minute to tell us what she would do in a situation like this, but this is one of the problems that we have with cats. They roam by nature. They're territorial by nature. They're used to going someplace by nature. They're not going to quit doing it because you got a grouchy neighbor. At the same time, we've got a gentleman that's what he thinks he's doing is protecting his private property rights, and there's kind of a head-on collision just waiting to happen there at some point. Surely would be nice if neighbors could work these things out, but it sounds like that's not an option here. If you were to be called to a scene where an animal is in a trap, a humane trap, without food or water, exposed to the elements on private property, what are you allowed to do?
It would depend on the setup of the property to an extent. If it's behind a privacy fence or something of that nature where I can't just get to it, as long as the cat wasn't exhibiting any immediate signs of distress or that it was in severe distress or something like that, there wouldn't be much I could do. The cat would have to be exhibiting signs of severe distress to the point to where I can warrant taking it and then going back to the court and be like, this is why I did it without getting a warrant.
Fourth Amendment exception.
Yes.
And similarly with wildlife that would be trapped and unattended, same thing?
Same thing.
Mr. Bell, how do you instruct people to deal with the situation with their cats straying over and getting on it? And because this has come up before and you've handled it before, getting on the neighbors' cars and doing things that are objectionable on their private property. How do you advise pet owners such as this lady?
Well,
Ms. Martin.
as far as private property, the individual owning that property has a right to trap a nuisance animal on their property. His next right, and the only right, is to take that animal to the shelter. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Cannot kill that animal, can't poison it, can't shoot it, can't do anything.
Wildlife has a little bit of different rules. The nuisance wildlife, so the cat's that's the only option.
So the only option that he has is to take that cat to the shelter, correct? What I find over the years that I've been helping cats, free roaming cats, they're very routine based. They do the same thing every day only because they go to sleep, they wake up, they're still alive, they like it like that, and they do the same thing the next day. As far as deterring that behavior, it is possible, but they're not like a dog. They don't learn overnight. There are methods, and there are many deterrents out there. The first thing I do is try, when I come across a situation with a caregiver and a complainant, is to find out what the details of the problem is and address them accordingly. We like to put the responsibility on the caretakers to keep their cats under their control, because the cats trust the caretaker more than they do the complainant or anyone else, and the caretaker has a higher chance of success to change that routine on their own. At the same time, I always work with the complainant to educate them on ways to also change that behavior. And normally 90% of everybody I deal with, they don't want the cats to be taken to the shelter to be euthanized. They want the cats to stay off their car or stay out of their garden. And there are many ways for them to accomplish that too. So the first thing I always try to do is to solve the problem, so the complainant is happy and it doesn't have the problems that were existing. And then to confirm that is done by the caretaker, everything that's done by the person that's handling the cats. First of all, we fix everything immediately because 90% of all the nuisance behavior goes away once cats are fixed. But after that fact, it's ultimately the caregiver's responsibility to control the routine behavior of their animals. And that's how I deal with it. And we're successful in most occasions. There are situations, if you have 100 cats in a zero lot line neighborhood and you have houses all around, that's impossible. It's just not going to happen. You and I have been on projects before where we've had to remove cats. In the old days, we removed them because we had no other options. We just removed them and we euthanized healthy animals and we hoped they didn't continue to multiply. But that policy has led us to the crisis that we experience in our country now. And things are changing. They really are. So what a lot of it becomes, it eventually becomes a civil situation between the complainant and the caretaker. And when I say caretaker, it doesn't necessarily mean a registered colony. It can be just someone feeding the cats. We all know we can't stop the feeding. We try to regulate it the best we can and work with those individuals to fix their animals. But in most occasions, if the problem can be solved, there is a logical solution to it. But in some cases, when it becomes a civil issue between the two parties, the cats end up becoming just a tool in the argument, and it really has nothing to do with the cats. So there are situations that are always going to be that way. But I find in the last 20 years of working with cats, our progress has been tremendous, and we have, since 2008, we have spayed and neutered over 35,000 cats in Volusia County. So we are starting to make a difference. The population is still growing, but it's not growing as fast as it was. So there's 35,000 less animals contributing to the population.
So, Ms. Martin, I think what I'm hearing from Mr. Belt and what I'm hearing from Ms. Wilkes is that you need to step up the effort to make sure your cats don't go on this gentleman's property. Because we don't make ordinances here. We put together ideas and submit them to the city for the ordinance to be passed. That's where we fit in here. And I doubt there's anything that we can fit in to our current animal control ordinance that would cover something like that. And it's probably already covered in either state statute or maybe even the county. I don't know. But the bottom line is that you're responsible for your animals, and though it may be their very nature to roam, we all have come to accept that. This gentleman's private property rights, I think, trump the nature of the cat. It's his property, and your cats should stay off of his property. That's not my idea. My cats roam, and if I got a neighbor, I just pray that I don't have neighbors like that someday, because they go 3 or 4 houses either side of my house routinely every day, and
Right.
it would be very unfair to my cats, and it would be an inconvenience to me to have somebody like you have living next door to you. But when you get right down to it, we can't tell him not to put the traps out.
Right, but as I understand it, animal abuse is a felony now in the first degree. And
If that happens, report it. If what you think is
if any wildlife gets in that trap in this particular heat and is not addressed under a plastic tarp, well, I guess we're trying to protect an idiot from theirself at this point. I personally was never given the opportunity to control this situation, because that's the first thing I said is when they moved in. I said, I do have cats. I said, if you have any problem, please come see me, and I will rectify the situation. And then, of course, I always call a very special friend who has a special knowledge, a lot of knowledge in cats. I said, what do I do? And I did exactly what my friend told me to do. And I can't believe they went from sound meter to 4 traps. And I'm like, it just, and to me it would seem like just traps in public, they have to take them to the shelter, but I'm looking at the possibility in this heat of an animal being injured, or worse, death, or, and not even my animal, just one of our feral animals, a raccoon, or whatever would get in the trap,
Well, I think it's just a matter of, if you see something like that, report it. I say there are laws and rules and statutes and ordinances in place to address that issue.
Right.
But
Yeah, the animal cruelty ordinance would take precedence over any other issue at that time. If you feel a cat has been in a trap without food and water or shelter for a period of time where it could cause suffering to the animal, then that would be up to animal control to make that determination. But they need to be notified immediately.
Right.
Okay.
so I think the mechanism's in place to deal with it. An issue like that, you're just going to have to stay on top of it.
Right.
If you see it happening, be the one to report it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay. Thank you for your time.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Hold the pen, I'll get
And we'll talk more about it I'll help the best I can to help solve the problem. Okay?
Any other public comment? Board members, any other comments? We voted on the meeting thing.
Yes.
Okay, so we're just going to wait and set the date. You'll let us know.
As soon as I hear something from Volusia County, I'll find out when this is the chamber's next available and set a date.
Okay, very good. There being no further business before the board, we stand adjourned. Thank you. Thank you for joining.